I never thought this day would come. When I was younger, my friends used to whisper about old age homes. Places where forgotten parents were sent to live out the last of their years in quiet loneliness. I used to shake my head and say, "No, not my children. Not my son. He would never do that to me." But life has a way of teaching us lessons we never asked for. It was a bright morning when my son arrived. I remember the sound of his car pulling into the driveway, the way I hurried to the door with a smile. I had made tea, his favorite biscuits, because even after all these years, I still felt like a mother waiting to spoil her little boy. He came inside with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He avoided looking around the house where he had grown up. The house filled with pictures of his childhood taped and framed on every wall. "Mama," he said gently, too gently, the way someone speaks when they are about to break your heart. My smile faltered. "Yes, Beta? What is it?" He sat me down at the table. "Mama, I think it's time. You can't stay here alone anymore. You've fallen twice in the past month and I worry about you. You need care, attention. There's a home nearby. They'll look after you." For a moment, I thought I had misheard. I laughed nervously. "A home? This is my home. I don't need strangers to look after me. I have you." But his face grew serious. "Mama, you know I have work, the kids, responsibilities. I can't always be here. It's for your own good." My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the table. My own son. The boy I carried in my arms. The boy I stayed awake for during his fevers. The boy I sent to school with ironed clothes, even when my hands ached, was telling me there was no room for me in his life anymore. The room spun around me. I wanted to scream, to plead, to remind him of everything I had sacrificed, but the words stuck in my throat. All I could whisper was, "How can you do this to me?" He didn't answer. He only looked away. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting in the back seat of his car, clutching a single suitcase. The ride was silent, except for the sound of my heart breaking. As we pulled up to the old age home, I saw the iron gates, the faded sign, the rows of elderly faces peering out of windows. My chest tightened. This was not a place of family. This was a place of waiting. Inside, the staff welcomed me kindly, but their kindness only deepened my pain. They spoke as though I were a burden being passed into their hands. My son hugged me briefly, too quickly, and whispered, "You'll be fine here. Mama, I'll visit." Then he left. I stood in the doorway of the small room assigned to me. A single bed, a wardrobe, and a small table. No pictures of my family, no curtains of my choosing, no familiar smell of home, just emptiness. That night, I cried into my pillow silently so no one would hear. The loneliness pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. I had never felt so invisible. The walls seemed to whisper the same question over and over. Was I no longer needed? Was I no longer loved? And for the first time in my life, I truly felt abandoned. The first weeks in the old age home felt like a slow suffocation. Every corner of the building smelled of antiseptic and boiled vegetables. The walls were painted in pale colors, the kind that were meant to be calming but only reminded me of hospitals. The rooms looked the same, lined up like boxes, each with a single bed and a window that opened to the same patch of garden. I would wake up each morning to the sound of footsteps in the corridor, the creak of wheelchairs and the occasional cough from behind closed doors. My bed was neatly made, my meals were served at the same times, and the nurses spoke kindly but impersonally, as though reading from a script. But what I missed most was not the comfort of home, but the sound of my family, the laughter of my grandchildren, the way my son used to call out, "Mama, I'm home," even as a grown man, the feeling of belonging to someone. Here I was just another old woman, with thinning hair and trembling hands. The first time I joined the others in the common room, I sat quietly in the corner. The room buzzed with low conversations. Some residents were playing cards, some were knitting, some were simply staring out the window. A few eyes looked at me with curiosity, but no one spoke. I felt invisible. At mealtimes, I sat at a long table with strangers who barely touched their food. The clinking of spoons against plates echoed louder than any laughter. Once a man across from me muttered, "My son put me here too," before falling silent again. His eyes looked empty, hollow, as though the life had been drained out of him. I realized then that I was not alone in my abandonment. But that didn't make the pain any easier. Days turned into weeks, and the routine became unbearable. Wake up, eat, sit, wait. I counted the days since my son had left me here. 1 day, 3 days, 10 days, 20. No visits, no calls. Each silence cut deeper than the last. Sometimes I would take out the few photographs I had managed to pack. One was of my son as a boy, his hair messy, his smile wide. Another of him on his wedding day, standing tall and proud. I would trace the outlines with my finger, tears blurring my vision. I wondered if he had already forgotten the woman who once carried him on her back when he was too tired to walk. But then something unexpected happened. One afternoon, as I sat on a bench in the garden, an elderly woman approached me. She walked slowly, leaning on a cane, but her eyes were sharp and warm. She smiled and said, "First week?" I nodded, surprised. "I can tell." She chuckled softly. "I cried every night during my first month. Thought my life was over. But it's not, you know. It's just different." Her words lingered in my heart. Life wasn't over, just different. Her name was Kamla. She had been living in the home for 3 years, after her children moved abroad and stopped visiting. Yet she carried herself with grace, her laughter often filling the corridors. She began to sit with me at meals, sharing little stories about her youth, about her garden back home, about the friends she had lost and the ones she had gained here. Slowly, through Kamla, I began to see the others differently. There was Mr. Iqbal, who played the harmonium every evening, his trembling fingers still managing to produce melodies that touched the heart. There was Rani, a woman who had lost her voice but spoke through her embroidery, stitching flowers so beautiful they seemed alive. And there was old Babulal, who told the same stories again and again, but each time with such passion that it felt new. For the first time, I didn't feel entirely invisible. Yet even as I began to notice others, my heart still ached for the family that had abandoned me. Every time the gates opened and a visitor arrived, my heart leapt with hope, only to fall again when it wasn't my son. I tried to hold on to Kamla's words. Life isn't over. Just different. But late at night, when the lights went out and the home grew silent, I would press my pillow to my face and weep quietly, mourning the life I had lost. Still, a seed had been planted. The faintest possibility that maybe, just maybe, even here in this place of endings, there could be new beginnings. Days stretched into weeks, weeks into months. And slowly, my world began to shift. The ache of abandonment still lived inside me. But I realized that if I let it consume me, I would wither away like the flowers in the neglected corners of the garden. I thought of Kamla's words often. Life isn't over, just different. So one morning, instead of staying in my room after breakfast, I joined Kamla in the common hall. She was helping another woman thread a needle for embroidery. Her hands shook with age, but her patience was endless. When she saw me, she smiled. "Come, sit. Do you know how to sew?" I laughed weakly. "Not much. I only know how to stitch buttons back on your son's school uniform." The words caught in my throat. My son. Even speaking about him still hurt. But Kamla patted the chair beside her. "Then you know enough." That day I picked up a needle and thread. Clumsy at first, but slowly something shifted in me. My hands, though wrinkled, remembered the motions. And as I stitched small, uneven patterns onto a square of cloth, I felt something I hadn't felt since I arrived. Usefulness. Over time, I began joining more activities. Iqbal uncle asked me to sing along when he played the harmonium, and though my voice was shaky, it blended with his music. Rani showed me how to embroider roses that bloomed bright on fabric. I even found myself laughing, real, full laughter, when old Babulal told his stories for the 10th time. The staff began to notice, too. One young nurse, Artie, said to me, "Auntie, you've got a calming presence. The others seem happier when you're around." Her words struck something deep inside me. For so long, I had seen myself as forgotten, abandoned, invisible. But here, perhaps, I could be something more. One evening, as I sat in the garden, Kamla asked, "Do you know why I smile so much?" I shook my head. "Because I realized," she said, her voice steady, "that if I let bitterness win, then my children's betrayal would defeat me twice. Once when they abandoned me, and again when I stopped living. I won't give them that satisfaction. Instead, I live fully. That is my victory." Her words lit a fire in me. She was right. My son had hurt me, yes, but I still had breath, still had hands to create, still had a voice to comfort, still had time to make meaning. The very next day, I decided to do something. At lunch, I noticed many of the residents sat in silence, eating mechanically, without joy. So I stood up, my heart pounding, and said, "Why don't we eat together, not just beside each other? We can share stories. We can make this feel less like a dining hall, more like a family table." There was hesitation at first. Some shrugged, some ignored me. But Kamla supported me, and soon a few joined in. That day, instead of silence, the hall filled with chatter. One woman shared a memory of her childhood village. Another spoke about the smell of mango season. Iqbal uncle hummed a tune between bites, and laughter rippled through the room. It was a small beginning, but it was a beginning. Word spread, and soon residents began to gather around me in the evenings. They asked me to tell stories, to sing old lullabies, to share recipes from my kitchen days. Slowly, the old age home began to feel less like a waiting room for the forgotten and more like a place of community. For the first time in a long time, I felt proud, not of what I had lost, but of what I was building. Of course, the nights were still hard. I still thought of my son, my grandchildren, the home I had left behind. I still cried sometimes, clutching the photographs I kept under my pillow. But in the morning, I rose with a new sense of purpose. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. And in the eyes of the other residents, when they smiled, when they clapped at my stories, when they asked me for comfort, I began to see something I had almost forgotten. Dignity. My dignity wasn't tied to whether my son wanted me. It wasn't tied to whether I lived in a big house or a small room. My dignity was in how I chose to face the life I had, and I chose to face it with courage. Just when life inside the old age home had begun to feel steadier, a test arrived. Sudden and uninvited, like a storm that rips through a quiet village. It began one winter morning. The air was sharp, and the cold seeped into my bones, no matter how many shawls I wrapped around myself. I woke with a heaviness in my chest, a cough that rattled like broken glass. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just the chill, just age. But by evening, I was feverish, trembling, too weak to rise from bed. The staff rushed in, Artie among them, her young face tight with worry. "We'll call the doctor," she said, adjusting my blanket. But I could see the fear in her eyes. For the first time since coming here, I felt truly vulnerable, alone, forgotten. I thought of my son. Would he care if he knew I was sick? Would he come? The answer stung before the question even finished forming. The doctor diagnosed me with pneumonia. Treatment began immediately, but the nights were brutal. My body ached, my lungs burned, and each breath felt like climbing a mountain. Lying there in the dark, I whispered prayers into the silence. "God, don't let me go like this. Not like someone discarded. Not before I can show them, and myself, that I am still more than what they believed." And then something happened. The people I had comforted, cheered, and encouraged, they came to me. Kamla sat by my bed every morning, holding my hand, humming hymns softly into the air. Iqbal uncle played his harmonium outside my room so I could hear the music drifting in. Rani embroidered me a bright red rose on a handkerchief and tucked it under my pillow. "Auntie, you gave us courage when we were sinking," she told me. "Now it is our turn," spires welled in my eyes. For the first time, I felt what I had been missing since my son left me here. Family. Not by blood, but by choice, by compassion, by the invisible threads of kindness. Recovery was slow. Some nights I still wondered if I would wake in the morning, but every time I opened my eyes, someone was there, holding vigil, reminding me I mattered. Their love stitched my broken spirit in ways no medicine could. Weeks later, when I finally stepped out into the garden again, leaning on a cane, the other residents clapped. It was such a small gesture, but it made my heart swell. I was alive. And more than that, I had survived, not alone, but carried by the very people who once seemed like strangers. That was when I realized the true meaning of resilience. It wasn't about pretending not to hurt. It wasn't about never falling. Resilience was allowing yourself to be lifted when you couldn't stand, and choosing to rise again when you could. From that day forward, I gave even more of myself. I began organizing evening circles where each person could share their story. Not just sorrows, but joys, lessons, dreams. I encouraged the younger staff to sit with us, to listen, so that we were not invisible to them. I started teaching some of the women embroidery, not because the stitches mattered, but because it gave them pride, a reminder that their hands still created beauty. And slowly the old age home began to change. It was still imperfect, still filled with ache and longing for children who rarely came, but it was no longer a place of silent waiting. It was a place of living. One afternoon, Artie said to me, "Auntie, you don't even know. You've become the heart of this home. You inspire even me." Her words echoed in me long after she left. The boy I had raised might have abandoned me. But here, in this unlikely place, I had found a new purpose. I was not just someone who had been left behind. I was someone who had risen, who had chosen love and dignity over despair. And I thought to myself, perhaps this was why God had brought me here, to show me, and through me to show others, that strength is not about where you stand, but how you rise when the ground falls away. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind where sunlight poured gently through the windows, and the home was filled with the hum of prayers, the rustle of newspapers, and the soft laughter of residents sharing tea. I had just finished teaching a few women a new stitch pattern when Artie came rushing in. "Auntie," she said softly, her voice trembling with something unspoken. "There's someone here to see you." Visitors were rare. My heart gave a sharp, almost painful beat. For a moment, I dared to hope. And then I scolded myself. No, it couldn't be. It had been too long. But when I stepped into the reception hall, there he was. My son, older than I remembered, lines of stress etched into his face. But unmistakably my child. He stood awkwardly, hands shoved in his pockets, avoiding my eyes like a schoolboy caught in mischief. "Ma," he whispered. The word cracked something open inside me. For years I had dreamed of hearing it again. For years I had dreaded it too. 1,000 emotions rose in me. Anger, grief, longing, love. All clashing like thunderclouds. I wanted to scream. "How could you leave me here?" I wanted to collapse into his arms and say, "My boy, I missed you every day." I wanted to turn away and protect my heart from breaking all over again. Instead, I stood still, my hands trembling at my sides. "Why are you here?" My voice was steady, though inside I was shaking. He swallowed hard. "I don't even know where to start," I thought. "I thought this was best. You seemed lonely in the house. I thought the home would, I don't know, give you company." A bitter laugh escaped me. Company. Or convenience. His face flushed with shame. He looked down. I was selfish. Work, family pressures. I let them all become excuses. And then I didn't visit because I was afraid of what I'd see in your eyes. Tears pricked mine. And what do you see now? He lifted his gaze at last. His eyes glistened, full of regret. Strength. More strength than I ever deserved to witness. For a long moment, silence stretched between us. I could feel the weight of years. The birthdays missed. The nights I cried into my pillow. The loneliness of waiting. I had carried that pain like a stone in my chest. But I had also found something here. I had found resilience, community, dignity. I had rebuilt myself from the ashes of abandonment. And now, standing before me, my son was no longer the boy I raised. He was a flawed man, broken by his own mistakes, seeking forgiveness. Ma, he whispered, his voice cracking. I don't deserve it. But if there is even a corner of your heart that can forgive me, I want to make things right. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply. Forgiveness is not easy. It is not forgetting. It is not excusing. It is a choice. One that frees the forgiver more than the forgiven. I thought of Kamla's words. If you let bitterness win, they defeat you twice. When I opened my eyes, I looked at my son. Truly looked at him. The child I had nursed. The boy I had sacrificed for. The man who had wounded me. And yet, my son all the same. I cannot forget what you did, I said, my voice trembling. But I also cannot spend the rest of my days chained to anger. You hurt me deeply, but you are still my son. And I will choose to forgive. Not for your sake, but for mine. His tears fell freely then, and for the first time in years, he stepped forward and embraced me. His arms around me were hesitant, almost afraid, but I leaned into them. The hug was not the same as before. Something had changed. Something had broken. But something had healed too. Behind us, I noticed Kamla and a few others watching quietly from the hall. They smiled, some with tears in their eyes. They had seen me at my lowest, and now they witnessed this. Not a perfect ending, but a human one. In that moment, I realized something profound. I had survived without my son. I had found strength without his presence. I didn't need him to complete me anymore. But forgiving him didn't weaken that strength. It magnified it. Later that evening, as he prepared to leave, he asked softly, "Can I come again? Can I try to be a better son?" I looked at him for a long time. "That is your choice," I said. "I have already made mine. I will live with dignity, whether you walk beside me or not." He nodded, understanding, and for the first time in years, there was peace between us. Fragile, tentative, but real. As I returned to the common hall, the others welcomed me with open arms, and I realized that forgiveness had not only freed me, but it had also given hope to those around me. Proof that even in the deepest wounds, healing was possible. In the weeks after my son's visit, something inside me shifted. Not because everything was suddenly perfect. No, the hurt didn't vanish overnight. But I had chosen to forgive, and that choice became a kind of freedom. I no longer carried the bitterness like a stone pressing down on my chest. I could breathe again. Word spread quickly through the home. Some residents whispered, "She forgave her son after all he did?" Others looked at me with quiet admiration. One evening, Kamla clasped my hands and said, "Do you know what you've done? You've given all of us hope. If you can forgive, maybe we can too." That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the strange journey life had taken me on. I came here broken, abandoned, stripped of dignity. Yet through the pain, I had discovered something I never expected. That strength doesn't come from being loved without flaw. Strength comes from rising even when love fails you. Soon the evening gatherings we had begun grew larger. Residents who had once sat in silence now shared openly. Stories of betrayal, of loneliness, of missed chances. But they also shared laughter, small victories, even dreams they still held close. The home no longer felt like a waiting place for forgotten lives. It felt alive, pulsing with stories, with resilience. The staff began to notice too. Artie once told me, "Auntie, you've changed the energy of this place. Before people just survived. Now they live." Her words humbled me, but I knew the truth. I hadn't done it alone. Pain had forced me to break open, and in that breaking, others found permission to heal too. My son visited again, this time with his children. They were shy at first, unfamiliar with me after so long. But when I told them stories of their father's childhood, the mischief, the laughter, the stubborn streaks, their eyes lit up. Slowly, a new bond began to grow. I didn't fool myself into thinking time could erase everything. But I learned something more important. Love doesn't always return the way you expect. But if you keep your heart open, it can still return. Standing in the garden one evening, I looked around at the faces of the residents. Once strangers, now family. And I felt a deep peace settle inside me. I had been left here to fade away. Instead, I had become a reminder that even in abandonment, life can be reclaimed. And so, my message to anyone listening is this. You may be forgotten by those you love most, but you must never forget yourself. You are worthy. You are strong. And your story, no matter where it unfolds, can inspire others. Dignity is not given by others. It is claimed by how you choose to live. I was sent here in sorrow. I will leave remembered in strength.